good. All right, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. It's Whole Building Life Cycle Assessment, Introduction and Tools. I'm excited to hear from Jennifer O'Connor from Athena, Travis Dahl from OneClick, and Kelsey Rose Price from Building Transparency. So first, a little bit about the Carbon Leadership Forum. We accelerate transformation of the building sector to radically reduce the embodied carbon in building materials and construction. We pioneer research, create resources, and collaborate to bring embodied carbon emissions of buildings down to zero. We are architects, engineers, contractors, material suppliers, building owners, and policymakers. This webinar is hosted by the CLF Nashville Hub, and a recording will be available on our YouTube page. We'd like to start with a quick overview of background information of the life cycle assessment, often called an LCA. An LCA is the investigation and evaluation of the environmental impacts of a product, process, or service. LCA evaluates all stages of a product's life and considers the interdependence on each stage. It allows practitioners to make informed, responsible, and balanced decisions to deliver a product with optimized environmental performance.
According to the Life Cycle Thinking Guidance document published by the Sustainable Materials Coalition, the key to life cycle thinking is to consider the impacts of a material throughout its full life cycle. This is from the extraction of the raw materials used to make the product through the product's manufacturing phase, use phase, and end of life, including waste management and recycling. It looks at a range of inputs and effects, such as energy use and related emissions, water use, and the potential for human toxicity and ecological effects. Next slide. These are the stages of the building life cycle. Whole building life cycle assessment allows us to model and estimate emissions associated with each stage. Now, holistically, embodied carbon includes all of these stages, with the exception of B6 and B7, operational energy and water use. Embodied carbon describes all stages of a material's life cycle, not just A1 through A3 product stage emissions. However, these product stage emissions are commonly evaluated today due to many reasons, one of which being that it can be calculated with the highest level of certainty. However, the practice of whole building life cycle assessment allows for the evaluation of stages beyond the product and construction stages. Next slide. There are several tools on the market that can assist with quantifying impacts of individual projects and materials. Today, we are very excited to have experts from Athena, OneClick LCA, Tally, and EC3 present to us. And with that, I will hand it over to Jennifer O'Connor, President of Athena Sustainable Materials Institute.
Great, can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. Okay. Well, Katie and Nicole, thanks for that. That was a very quick but really effective introduction to whole building LCA. It's going to save us speakers some time to not have to do that bit. And thank you all for joining. Let me do a share now. Just 1 second. And do this. Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to talk very briefly about the Athena Institute and our free software tool, the Impact Estimator for Buildings. Okay, I just want to say a couple words about the Athena Institute. We're not a software company. That is not what we're all about. Our tools are simply a tactic to deliver on our mandate. And our mandate is to advance the science and the uptake of LCA in the built environment. We're a nonprofit research and advocacy group. We've been around since 1997, but our work actually dates back to the late 80s. We do work as LCA consultants, and we do work in the public service. As LCA consultants, we have done hundreds of studies on products and materials. This is the primary source of the data that's in our software tools. It's from our own LCA work. We're also very active in the EPD world, and we do a lot of peer reviews of the LCAs and EPDs of others. In our public service work, we do a lot of LCA-based research. We provide LCA information and policy support. We sit on LCA standards committees, and we have been providing free software tools since 2002, which is probably why LCA has shown up in green building programs and policy. Okay, this is a very simplified sort of flow chart of how the impact estimator works. This tool was launched way back in 2002, and we've been updating and improving it ever since. This is a free software tool. It's PC-based desktop software, but we've got a workaround solution for Mac users. The software can be used at any point in design, any type of building. It can be used for whole buildings or parts of buildings, and it delivers full cradle to grave results. So users start by inputting some information, location, an optional bill of materials, optional operating energy consumption, and then the tool will tap into its back-end databases. And that's where we have our own high quality, highly regionalized US and Canadian material and process data, and our scenario databases. And then the tool will calculate results. Okay, I want to just walk through some screenshots to just give you a sense of how the software works. And so the first step is to choose the closest city to the project location, and that will allow the tool to deliver regionally accurate material transportation and energy grid results. Next, the software needs a bill of materials for your project. There's two options here. So early design, before you have a bill of materials, you can let the software calculate it for you based on your inputs in a dialog like the sample on the screen for spans, loads, and types of assemblies. The second option, a little bit later in design, you've got your own bill of materials from another source, like a BIM file, and you can import that. So you would import your file, you're going to map your materials to the names and units of measure in the software, and then assign those materials to assemblies in the building. You just need to be sure to carefully check for any missing materials from your import source. Alrighty, so your material and energy quantities will now be linked with environmental data in the background. So that's the high quality harmonized life cycle inventory data that we have typically generated ourselves. Consistency of background data is incredibly important to the reliability of results. And this consistency issue is something that is generally not well understood by most tool users, and it's something that we take very seriously. You can make custom concrete mixes, and that's an important feature because changing the mix can get you some big impacts, can have a big impact on embodied carbon. Okay, so you've got your bill of materials, you've got your location, you've specified the number of years you want the model to run, and now you can get results. So this software will put out results in tables and graphs by life cycle stage and by assembly group, or you can export it all to Excel and then do whatever you like with it. Here's a table example showing LCA results by life cycle stage. And then here I've got an example of graph results, and this is showing results by assembly group. If you have included operating energy in the model, you can compare operating and embodied impacts. Here's a comparison of two design options. It's easy to do side-by-side comparisons in this tool. This slide is showing the project tree that's always visible when you're in the software, and you can set it to display a running total as you work. You can set it by value or percent of any of the LCA measures. It's showing GWP here, and it's showing it by assembly. You can generate reports in Word. So you can do a full project report or a submittal report specifically tailored for the LCA credits in LEED or Green Globes. Okay, I want to close with a few slides on uncertainties and gaps in whole building LCA. And I think all of us tool providers have a transparency and an educational responsibility here. And so I want to share these notes with you. Remember that in LCA, we are modeling, we're not measuring. Accuracy and precision are not as high as the results might suggest, for example, the types of results on the slide here, and that there is always uncertainty in the results. LCA is an estimating science. We have to make assumptions, a lot of assumptions, and we have to predict the future. And then on top of that, there are gaps and variations in the background data and methods. And the key to that, the key is to understand the factors that affect reliability. And if you pay attention to those factors, then you can be reasonably confident in your results. So first, you need to make sure that you've got an accurate and complete list of the bill of materials in your model and that you are modeling the complete system. Second, hold us tool providers accountable for comprehensive documentation on the quality, completeness, and harmonization of our background data and method. And then third, include as much of the life cycle as you can and be mindful of any stages that you are missing completely or partially. Whole building LCA in general is lacking complete information about the stages beyond the product stage, and this can create a real risk of burden shifting and unintended consequences. As a nonprofit institute working in the public good, we're always working to address gaps and uncertainties, and it's part of our common good mandate and to help support green building policy and programs. So I just want to mention 3 of our current efforts along those lines. So first, we are coming out this fall with a web version of the impact estimator. It's going to be a complete overhaul, look very different from those screen grabs that I just showed you. This is a next generation tool, and it's going to be compliant with new national guidelines that I'm going to mention on the next slide. And the tool will continue to be free. Second, a big issue, a huge gap right now in LCA is valid and robust comparisons and benchmarking. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what is required to actually do a fair comparison. So we're actively working on a solution right now, and we will launch a pilot of that within our software next year. Finally, we're also actively addressing a skills gap. Tools like ours make it easy to do LCA, but understanding results, checking for errors, understanding the underlying standards, and using the results effectively, that's a lot harder, that's a gap. So earlier this year, we helped launch a professional education and credentialing program that's remote learning. The next sessions run this fall. If you want to do a screen grab to get that link, the registration is open right now. Okay, finally, just some recommended reading. I really recommend this if you really want to improve your practice. First is this brand new, first of its kind, comprehensive guidelines for conducting, reporting, comparing, and benchmarking whole building LCA. The link for that, it's a free document, is at the bottom of the slide. Next, there are two key international standards for EPDs and that contain material that is actually aimed at users of EPDs. So if you are using EPDs in your whole building analysis, or if you're using EPDs to choose between products, I strongly recommend a careful read of these two ISO standards, those particular clauses. Okay, I think that's it for me. I think I'm on time. I encourage everybody to join our mailing list. We do not send emails out very often at all, just when we think there's a resource out there like those guidelines that, that the whole building LCA community would benefit from. Okay, I'm wrapping up. Thanks very much. I'm going to hand it over to Travis.
Great, thanks for sharing, Jennifer. I will quickly share my screen here as well. So yeah, just a quick background on myself. My name's Travis Dahl. I'm a relative newcomer to the LCA world, as well as OneClick LCA. My background is in construction management, and something that I've always been passionate about is sustainability, and realizing that from a project management standpoint, there's a minimal amount of control that and impact that we can have on a project. So when I learned more about what OneClick was doing, you know, and really both Kelsey and Jennifer, the work that you guys are doing, I wanted to get involved. So so here I am, and I'll give you just a quick rundown of OneClick and kind of where we fit in the market, and hopefully there's enough time to make a quick pass through the tool, just to give you a sense of how it works. But I think a lot of people have read these stats before, but I'll go over them anyway. We're expecting over the next 30 years or so that we're going to be doubling the building inventory in the world. Really, that's the equivalent of building New York City every month over the next number of decades. So really focusing on everything that's going into these new constructions is going to be really important. And why is embodied carbon something that's so important? I think, Jennifer, you touched on this as well. Something that we've looked at in the construction industry over the last number of decades is operating efficiency and operating carbon. This is still in most places around the world the majority of that pie, but as we continue to decarbonize the energy mix, the embodied carbon is going to continue to be is going to grow in importance. The other side of this as well is that for us to be reaching the 2030 goals of reducing our carbon emissions by 50%, the operating carbon really doesn't get realized until the end of the building's life cycle, whereas the embodied carbon is a spent cost as soon as the building reaches occupancy. So if we want to be having the biggest impact earliest on, we really want to be focusing on the embodied carbon. This slide kind of really just shows the same thing. We've got you know, the extraction, manufacturing, and construction stage here, and this dotted blue line would be occupancy. So the other remaining 50 to 65%, roughly, depending on where the building is constructed. Those operating emissions are spread out through the rest of that lifespan, but this embodied stage is right up front. So with OneClick, we're trying to build tools that address every stage of that building lifespan. We are really, I think these should be reversed. We've developed tools for product manufacturers to help make it easier to generate what's called EPD, if you're not familiar with that. Get familiar. It stands for Environmental Product Declaration. And those are it's kind of like a recipe book for the carbon and environmental footprint of an individual product. We take those EPDs and enter them into our database, which it says we've got about 100,000 data sets here. I think we're actually, we may have surpassed 140,000 data points at this point. But ultimately, the purpose of that is to make it easier for designers, designers and builders to make better material choices. And really, that's something that all of these platforms do, is to help make better decisions easier. So we also work with businesses that may have portfolios and help them with their greenhouse gas reporting. And we've got a number of different tools to make these things easier. So like I mentioned, we've been collecting EPDs globally. We're around 140,000 LCA data sets, or sorry, EPD data sets. We draw those from a variety of different EPD publishing groups and databases. Our tools integrate with practically everything that you're going to be using in the design space, whether it's Revit or Rhinoceros, IES, and so on. With any of these tools, I mean, they can get complicated. Before these tools existed, you really needed to have a PhD to be able to perform an LCA. So, you know, we've done everything that we can to make this process quite easy. And the fact that somebody with my background can actually go through this process, and hopefully I'll have time to show you that and do an LCA, just shows a lot. We also offer a ton of training just to make sure that anybody who's delving into this is well prepared for that process. Within the tools, our three key drivers is to identify hotspots, because really the hotspots of the carbon emissions are going to be your low-hanging fruit. You know, everybody's heard about how terrible for the environment concrete is, and you know, almost in every circumstance, that's going to be your hotspot. So identifying where those are and where we can actually make some material changes or design changes to improve the footprint. But we need to know where exactly those hotspots are, which is really where our opportunities are. And then having good, clear visualizations to be able to show to your clientele and anybody that you need to share the information with, and just make it easy for them to understand. And yeah, just generating a lot of interesting results. We have tools for every stage of the project. So whether this is super early strategy stage and no design has been done, we've got the Carbon Designer 3D tool. This will allow you to basically create a perfect model of your project and generate a full bill of materials that offers the architecture team guidance on what the most effective way of building a project is going to be. We have tools that'll plug into Rhinoceros and IES, like I mentioned, Grasshopper. Moving on to the design stage, we can export from Revit, which I'll give you a quick demo on. Excel, Trimble, whatever you're using, we usually have plugins for that. And being able to make adjustments in the construction stage and improve products, or maybe choose alternatives if some weren't available, we can do all that. And then when it comes to renovating projects, bringing them back to life, and measuring the circularity of the materials that are going into it, and ultimately reporting on portfolios as well, and just making sure that everything that's in the portfolio is calculated as well as possible. Like Jennifer mentioned, the measurement of these systems is not perfect yet. There's still a lot of holes that need to be filled in, but a lot of good work has happened in the last while to really color in those pages. So that's continuing to improve, and obviously the more we're taking into account, the better we're able to move forward with that. This just demonstrates some of the different integrations that we have. So OneClick also has, this page just highlights some of the free tools that we have. So we've got LCA's planetary tool, which offers, you can do a full LCA model within the A1 to A5 life cycle stages. There's quite a few different EPDs that are within the planetary tool as well, and you can do regional benchmarks on this as well. With OneClick, we've designed it to be as easy to use. Really, it's like, I think I've covered a lot of this already. Like, it's a pretty holistic set of tools that can plug into any stage of the project. We integrate to practically any tool that people are going to be using. We draw from global data. Our tool is used all around the world, and we keep data on past projects just to help generate real world benchmarking. We have compliance tools like for virtually every global compliance scheme that's out there, whether it's LEED or Living Building Challenge or zero carbon buildings in Canada, and like I mentioned, we cover pretty much the entire value chain. If you're also interested, you can check out a free trial just by going to our website and click on that free trial button that's at the top, and that's my contact info. If you're in Canada, usually I'll be your primary contact. If you're connecting in the US as well, you can reach out to me, but I'll probably forward you on to Vasilis. He's kind of our EPD expert as well, so he's great with those sorts of things. So let's see, how am I for time? We've got 4 minutes, so let me see if I can go through this quickly. What I'll do is I'll skip the Revit export, but basically what I want to show is that this is the typical Revit model that I think most people are familiar with. What can be done is you can actually do a full LCA within Revit and make any of your modifications within here, but I am going to skip that step. Once the LCA is done, you can still export that into our cloud-based tool, and that's where you'll get a lot of our more powerful visualizations and material swapping tools as well. So, but I will just hop over into our tool. So this is our main dashboard when you first enter into a project, and there's a fair amount of information here, but generally speaking, this we've got you can measure your project on your regional benchmark, and this is just drawn from Q3 of 2021 in the US. So that's how this particular building will compare with other similar types of buildings. This would be a single family home or one dwelling building, and then it breaks things down among the different life cycle stages required for that particular metric that I chose for this model. And then you can also see some of your hotspots as well in different structures and different categories of the A1 to A3. There are I've got a couple of different projects in here that I just plugged in here for demonstration's sake, and is you can really put as many different models in here and get a bunch of different comparative charts that can be exported, and these will just help you compare with your for demonstration to your clients or whoever you may need to be presenting information to. If we go into one of these projects, I'm going to look at the building materials query. And within here, you can see all of the materials that are, this was all exported from Revit, and the quantities are already taken off and taken care of. It automatically will categorize and sort all of your materials based on based on our algorithm that's built into the tool. Of course, it doesn't always pick up everything. So what you can do is manually select those when you're importing this data. It'll prompt you to do all of that. It's super easy. And then when when you go to import another project with that same material, it'll remember what your past preferences were, and this will be within your company account. So what somebody does in another company doesn't affect other accounts, but it will be remembered within your organization. And if we decided that we wanted to change this particular material, we can actually go into change and really quickly and easily select amongst other materials and do a direct side-by-side comparison of EPDs. I'll just pull up a quick data card just so you can have a sense of what these look like. EPDs can be kind of a pain to read, just because they're often formatted differently. The information is generally going to be the same, but having the information formatted in a similar way so you can actually compare side by side is pretty valuable. And then, of course, like with our expert licenses, we've got the materials divided into really quintiles of how it ranks with other similar materials. So for example, this particular one is 56 out of 422 materials that fit this description of concrete. Moving on to the results page. This will give us the, well, I'll show here we are with Carbon Heroes benchmark again. This particular tool that I selected is breaking out global warming potential, biogenic carbon, and social cost of carbon. Depending on which tool you use, for example, if it's going to be LEED, there'll be a whole bunch of other impact factors that are in this chart as well. And then again, divided by the life cycle stages on the left here. We can also look at what our most contributing materials are, so we know what our hotspots are, and quickly and easily find what these materials are, and possibly swap them out for something different, or analyze our build method and see if there's a way that we can minimize what's being used there. And then here we have a ton of different charts, whether it's bubble or Sankey, however you want to be presenting this data. There's probably a chart here, and if there's another way that you want to present it, you can of course download the Excel file and generate your own charts to present however you like. I am going to leave it there for the sake of time, and I'm going to pass it over to Kelsey.
Great, thanks Travis, and thanks Jennifer for the great presentations before, and thank you to the CLF for inviting us to come and present on our tools. So just an introduction of myself. I am Kelsey Rose. I'm with Building Transparency. And Building Transparency is a nonprofit organization that started out as an organization that was created to manage one of our flagship programs, the EC3, Embodied Carbon and Construction Calculator tool. So that tool was launched, it was incubated by the CLF and with many other stakeholders from the industry. It was launched in 2019, November of 2019. And so Building Transparency, that organization was created in early 2020 for the continuation and management of EC3. Last year, we were gifted the Tally tool from Kieran Timberlake, which was a very exciting gift to get from them. And so I'm going to talk about Tally, our whole building lifecycle assessment tool, and EC3 today. So I will start with Tally. And Tally has, although Building Transparency and EC3 have only been around for 2 or 3 years, Tally has been around much longer than that. Kieran Timberlake started it, I want to say back in 2012 or 2016, I should know that. But it has been around a lot longer. You can go and download Tally and start a free trial of Tally. If you go to choosetally.com and go to the download, you'll be able to start your own free trial if you would like. But I kind of want to just jump right into the tool and show you how it works. So Tally, once you download it, it is a plugin for Revit. So whole building lifecycle assessment tool specifically for Revit. It works specifically in the Revit environment. So after you download it, it will become a little button on your add-ins ribbon. And then that will launch the Tally window. So the Tally has three main functions. I'm going to focus on the full building study just for the interest of time today. And that would be if you were running a whole study of your project. The design option comparison would be if you want to look at two design options, I guess, for a certain component of your building. And the define template file is kind of a time-saving function. So I'll focus on the full building study. So for any life cycle assessment, you have to define the scope of the LCA. And so that's what you're doing here in this first window here. You are selecting what Revit category you want to include in your life cycle assessment. And then you're also selecting what information from Revit itself. So, what work set, what phase created do you want to also use? So I'm going to say that I want to include everything for my sample project here. And that'll bring up the Tally browser of information. So how Tally works is that it takes information from Revit, dimensional information from Revit in the form of Revit's families. And then for that dimensional information that it's brought in, the geometric information, you as the user go in and you assign material definitions to those geometric informations. And that's kind of the process. So the idea is to go from all of these gray lights to green, and that will tell you that you're fully defined for that material. So for example, my background is a structural engineer. I was a structural engineer for almost a decade before I joined Building Transparency. So I'm going to go to my favorite, concrete. So I'm going to go to this concrete slab in my model. I'm going to edit the definition for that. And I can get into Tally's database, material database. So Tally is based off of a static database, the Gabby database. So Kieran Timberlake worked with Sphera, I think Step Gabby, and created the Gabby database that Tally pulls from. So it is not a database of EPDs. It is a database of generic information that is to represent the North American market. So Tally was specifically made for North American construction practices. There are some select EPDs within Tally, but for the most part, you're going to find generic information here. And it's supposed to be representative of, a generic and average condition for that. So say I wanted to do concrete, cast in place. We're going to say that's a 5,000 PSI slab. You'll be able to find this window will look differently depending on what material you are defining within Tally. So for concrete, you have all of these great choices. I'm going to say that it is a Pacific Northwest. I'm based in the Pacific Northwest, so I'll say it's concrete representative of that area. And then I can also define kind of accessory materials that are appropriate for that element. So in this case, where there's concrete, there's usually reinforcement. So I'm going to apply a reinforcing to this as well. And then now that I've turned both of those red lights to green, I can save. And I've turned the gray light to green. And so the whole idea is that you go through your model and you assign materials to everything within your model. And you can see, information about those materials and about the geometric information that Revit is pulling in over here. So as you go through and you do that, you're going to get all of your lights to green. This is the same model, but with all material definitions applied. And then you can go and save a report. And so once you fill out all of these fields, you can hit save, and that will create your Tally PDF report. And similar to what Jennifer and Travis were talking about, this PDF report is specifically aimed at being where it can be used for certification purposes, such as LEED, but it also just has a lot of information for your project and for your life cycle assessment. So up here, for example, there's a snapshot of all of your impact categories across the different life cycle stages, those categories, the intensity of those impact categories. And then these are kind of the iconic tally charts where you can see kind of at a glance where the GWP or where your eutrophication potential lives in your project. Along with this tally PDF report is an Excel output. And this Excel output is the same information, just in a way that is easy for you to extract values. I really like to point this out because for some users, they're not looking for just the ability to submit to LEED, for example. They want to really do a deep dive on their life cycle assessment. And I think this Excel is really nice because it allows you to do that. It allows you to go in and look at your materials more specifically. It allows you to take these values and create your own charts if you want, if you don't want just these kinds of charts. And that really helps you if you're trying to communicate different client stories. So if you're trying to talk to your client about the options that they have on their project, or just the results of the project, the Excel report is one way to be able to manipulate the data and suit it to the story that you're trying to tell. Not a greenwashing story, but just the story of, this is what you're trying to say to your client. And then just to round it out, I'll show you at the end of the PDF report for tally, you can find the calculation methodology, and that'll tell you the information about what the life cycle assessment is doing in tally. It will also show you these life cycle stages. So I really appreciated that Katie at the very beginning of this pointed out that a lot of times we think of embodied carbon as just A1 through A3 or the product stages, but embodied carbon goes throughout the whole life cycle. So tally is a whole life cycle assessment tool, so it will give you information across the different life cycle stages from to cradle to grave. And it's not just focusing on A1 to A3. So that's tally in a nutshell. I'm going to switch over to EC3, and EC3 is a little bit of a different animal. It is free for everyone to use. Tally is license-based. EC3 is web-based and free for everyone to use. You can come to our page. You can register for free to access EC3. And at its core, what if you do log in and register, at its core, what EC3 is a database of environmental product declarations. So where I said that tally is pulling from a database of static generic information, life cycle assessment information, EC3 is pulling from just a huge database of environmental product declarations. And it's not just North America, as this graphic is kind of showing here. We are pulling from multiple sources around the globe, environmental product declarations. And we're constantly looking to pull more and more EPDs into the database. One of my favorite graphics to reference back to when I'm doing presentations is this one here, where it shows how many EPDs there are by different category available within EC3. You can see that concrete has the most EPDs by a large margin, and then finishes is next. So how do we access, or what do we do with these EPDs? So one thing is that you can go to this find and compare materials up here, and you can start searching through the database for whatever you're looking for. So for example, if I wanted to go look for gypsum, say I wanted to go look for some gypsum board, I can start searching the database for gypsum EPDs. So the search that I'm doing right now, I didn't put any kind of parameters on it. So I'm just asking for the entire world, what EPDs does EC3 have for gypsum? So we have 361 EPDs. I could modify that to instead look specifically at Tennessee, let's say. Okay, so now instead of the whole world, what do we have available in the state of Tennessee? Let's see, give this a second. I can see I have 25. So I could do it by location. I could also say, okay, instead I want type X gypsum. I want a panel thickness of 5/8. So that's, you can kind of have a broad search, or you can start narrowing it down. and take a look at the environmental products that meet your criteria. You can see statistics for them. So how much GWP is there in the statistics that you've come up with? Where Tally pulled from generic information and was a whole building lifecycle assessment tool, EC3, because it is powered by environmental product declarations, is only looking at, and that's what this is going at right here, is only looking at that product stage, that A1 through A3. We are coming up with more, we are expanding that. We have many plans for both Tally and EC3. And one of the plans for EC3 is to expand beyond A1 to A3. But right now, if you are using EC3, it is going to be only the product stage that you are looking at. And one of the reasons that we've focused there first is because EPDs is where you can get environment A1 through A3 data, but also your product stage is oftentimes the most impactful stage. That's not always the case depending on your project, but oftentimes it is. So that's one function within EC3, is just to be able to look at the environmental product declarations that are available. Another one is to actually start building a project. So you can go to this plan and compare buildings. You can create a new project, a building project over here. This is just an example. So to quantify and estimate the embodied carbon on your project, you need two things, right? You need your quantity of materials, and you need the global warming potential associated with that material. So that's really all this building planner is, if you boil down to it. There's information about your building up here, but you come down here and you create an element. You tell EC3 how much of that element there is, and then you assign a collection of EPDs to that element. There you go. Now you have your two variables filled out. And you can do that through the various components of your building and come up with overall information and estimations for your building. This is just an example project, so there's probably not too much in here, but you can look at it in the form of Sankey diagrams, you can look at it in the form of tree maps, things like that. Because we recognize that it is tedious to go through and do this, line by line. Maybe you have a bill of materials from your from your general contractor, maybe you're a structural engineer and you've come up with your own SMQs, but it is tedious to do that. So we have an integration with Tally, and this integration actually happened before we even took ownership of Tally. But we have an export to EC3 function in here. So instead of saving, I could have exported it to EC3. It will ask me to log into my EC3 account, and then it will export that project. So an exported project comes in and it has this little Tally like symbol right here. And then that brings in my bill of materials directly from Tally. And it also does, and it tries to automap from Tally as well. But you can come in and refine the EPD collections that have been assigned to that quantity of material. So Tally and EC3 talk to each other in that way. You could think of Tally as a great tool during the design phases where you use Tally to impact your decision making. So, what should I build out of? And then there's this handshake between Tally and EC3 towards maybe the end of the project, maybe in construction documents, where you hand it off to EC3, and EC3 helps you from a procurement standpoint. So, okay, I know I'm going to do concrete. Well, which manufacturer should I purchase from? Which concrete mix should I be looking at? Things like that. So there's this kind of great handshake between the two tools. I will note that Tally exports to EC3. EC3 does not yet export back to Tally. They don't talk back. EC3 doesn't talk back to Tally. Again, we have lots of exciting plans for both of these tools. And in the future, our plans include integration, a more heavy integration between the tools and a more seamless handshake than we even have now. So I will stop it there and kick it back to Katie and Nicole. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand, turn on your camera if you'd like. You guys covered the content so well.
I have one question. Kelsey, you kind of mentioned and I think this is what you're saying, but I just want to be crystal clear. You mentioned that you can go between the programs, but as far as currently, if you go between the programs, you can't take the information, the reductions that you've done in EC3, those can't translate back into the whole building life cycle assessment, right?
Right. Yeah, that's one result of what I was pointing out at the very end, is that if you are trying to show reductions not only through the choices that you've made in design, which you can do in Tally, but you're trying to show them through your procurement decisions, which you would show in EC3. If you want to show those, say, for lead reporting, you would have to do some amount of post-processing to kind of combine those two together. And that is one of the reasons why I said that we are really trying to look for a better integration between the tools so that you don't have to do that kind of post-processing.
Yep, awesome. Yeah, it sounds like it'll be a great tool to use once they can talk more together too. Be a good improvement. Thanks. And I don't know, I guess one more question for all of you, if we have a few minutes, if you can speak a little bit more about how you use the tools during the design process. Like if you're going through different iterations, I know you each kind of touched on it, but I think someone else might have a question too. If you're going through the design process and doing a lot of iterations, do you just re-export the information with each iteration? Or is there like a live, is anything live and able to automatically update?
I guess I can go first on that one. With OneClick, if you want to be recording those iterations, you would be adding multiple designs into the cloud tool. So basically, if you're making those iterations within Revit, exporting those iterations into OneClick and creating new designs for each one where you can compare them side by side. If you're not worried about recording those, it can also remain within Revit, and you can continue to make your perform your LCA within the tool. But yeah, if you want the recorded the records of it, then export it for sure.
I'll just say that that's somewhat similar for Tally at least, where you would at different milestones in your project or for different options, you would export something. There is that design option comparison feature that I didn't really go into, but that one allows you to look at two different options side by side. Those options would both be modeled in Revit as design options, but you would be able to do that kind of in, side by side rather than having to export one and then export the other.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, we will give everyone 8 minutes back. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you to our speakers for joining us today. This was recorded and it will be posted to our CLF Nashville YouTube page, and we will send out a link for that as well. So thank you all and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Katie.